My name is Nathan Lopes, Shalom Ephraim, all good people. To be quite honest, I have here questions in front of me, which I will respond properly within half an hour. So what I will ask these questions, and perhaps at a later stage we can discuss them more in length, and some of them which I will not be able to respond to purely because of a lack of time. First, something, as Ephraim asked me about our institute and who run a small philosophical institute, the David Army. David, the great-great-grandfather of mine, who was the chief rabbi of the Portuguese Spanish synagogue in Amsterdam. That's from where I hail. Our family are Sephardi, Portuguese Spanish Jews, who came in the 17th century via Italy to settled and were welcomed, which was quite unusual in these days, and they built there quite a gigantic synagogue. Some of you may have seen it, and a very kind of community. That's from where my family comes. The David Academy itself is basically an academy which deals with unusual questions about the Jewish tradition in the relationship to the state of Israel, modern issues, philosophically are of great importance, specifically in the state of Israel, has become a major country where I already for more than 40 years. Converted into the Jewish tradition when I was 16 years old. Jewish father, non-Jewish mother. My mother was disappointed because she has lost very early her parents in with my father, and that he fell in love, and how they before the Holocaust started, at least the ones that part. My mother then took the whole Jewish family of my father, more or less the same story as Anne Frank. Besides one person, everybody made it because in the Holocaust and came out at 45. I was born in was a very strong and very proud Jew, and the fact that he married my mother, I think, was looked at Jewish. Everything just halachic, not brother and I have a brother who's 2 years younger than me, and he lives in Amsterdam. And we always thought that we were Jewish. Till one bit more into it, we are not, because we didn't have a Jewish mother. So, long story, but when I was 16 years old, I went to the chief rabbi, the Sephardi, Portuguese, Spanish chief rabbi of Amsterdam, Chacham Shlomo Rodriguez Pereira, Sephardi name, and he was prepared to convert me, and that is what I did. All this obviously took some time. I started to fall totally and completely in love with the Jewish tradition, and I'm even more in love with it today. The more I study it, the more I challenge it, the more questions come up. I find this world, but it also means that I've moved away from the more, let's say, and the more streamlined form of Jewish tradition, and I found somehow my own. If you ask me if I'm Orthodox, then the answer probably is yes. I don't know at all what the word Orthodox really means, but closest in that world, and I believe that all what has to happen within the Jewish tradition will ultimately have to come from Orthodoxy, but Orthodoxy at this moment is not yet ready to are signs that things are changing. We discuss in our think tank many emotional issues, and then we have all sorts of different lectures taking place here in Israel in Goedsluis, all given by unusual people, professors, who think out of the box, and that's what I am. I'm going back to the question which was asked by the Chazan Matt, who asked me what the role is of music in my vision of the Jewish tradition. And later on, the same question was asked by him concerning Bach, Mozart, and Brahms, and other famous composers. I believe that religion and the Jewish tradition have a lot, or better, music and the Jewish in common. I don't see the halakha so much as a law. I see it more as a music note on which I play my religious music. And just like a musician will borrow the Mozart and starts to play his own music on these notes, I think we should do that as well. And that's also what I try to do in my life. By the way, am I religious? Then I say I'm still trying. Because by the way, I've never met anybody who's really, because religiosity and the experience of religion is a very difficult thing to achieve. It may never happen. And the most important thing here is to give it a try. And that's to do with my life. Upheaval is to me incredibly important. I feel that we are slowly moving away from orthodox, conservative, and reform, and some new movement will take place, perhaps a neo-Hasidic movement. I believe that there perhaps the response can be given to issues which are coming up. Nobody knows yet where this goes, but I do believe that the older denominations are slowly disappearing, but that will take time, and obviously there will be quite a fight about that, how that will happen and what are the... I personally am not looking at being more lenient. That to me over difficulties in place, but I don't think that we should look for Coca-Cola light Judaism. That's not what it is all about. What I would suggest is that there should be a greater amount of religiosity. And religiosity doesn't always have to somehow achieve its goals by lifting up. It can also be in a very lenient way, but the awareness of living in the presence of God, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is to me the most important challenge for all human beings. And we as Jews, we have to set an example over there, and that is what I think we should try to. So I'm asking for more religiosity, not just for more leniency. It should go hand in hand. There should be an awareness that we are living in a world of wonder, of amazement, or like Abraham Joshua Heschel so beautifully writes. And I try that, and successful, that normal things, and that gives also a tremendous spirituality to my prayers and to experience the halakha, which perhaps is a little different from the way how also people. Once more, I see it more as a musical note than as a law. I was asked in the questions which I have in front of me over here, if I feel lonely or how do I live in this loneliness. And many of you have seen the documentary about my life and about my ideas called Lonely But Not Alone. Loneliness in life. Baruch Hashem, I have a great family with children, grandchildren, even great-grandchildren. Obviously a very dedicated wife. But still person, and too many people badly speak with. Most people are in their own little box, and when I come with my questions or with my observations, some people have difficulties with that. I don't know where I am going and do not always hear carefully what I have to say or what I wrote. But I can personally live with that because I have some kind of an encounter with my books. When I learn, I'm actually speaking with the authors. And I hear somehow what their answers are. Greatly inspires me. Now, yes, these are not only Orthodox authors, and not just the full halachic life. I'm inspired by what I just mentioned before. Also, he, as you all know, JTS, but explanation in my life, my admirer of Spinoza, and you know that he came from the Amsterdam Sephardi community. Not so long ago, there was a big symposium in Amsterdam of the University of Amsterdam, where I spoke and I pleaded to remove the ban on Spinoza, not because of the Jewish tradition. I think actually that he didn't know much about that. And I said there at the time, that I think that he was a big Am Haaretz and ignorous when it came to matters. He really did not know much about it. But I still believe that we have to remove the ban purely for one reason. It made the Jewish tradition a very bad name. It suddenly was seen to be a dogmatic religion where everything is worked out to the detail, like we have in the Catholic Church and in also religions, while the Jewish tradition is not at all dogmatic. The 13 principles of Maimonides, the Yud Gimel Ikarim of Maimonides, by all our authorities and all our rabbis and all our thinkers. I think Icarius himself didn't believe in all of them. It is all open to discussion, and that is extremely beautiful. And that is, by the way, one of the reasons why I was so attracted by this religion. I don't know if the word religion is at all the correct word, but with this ideology, it allows for questions, it allows for challenges, it allows for even saying that we sometimes don't know the answer, which is only very healthy and very appropriate to move forward. And today, the Orthodox world, I think, is too much dedicated to the certain. Perhaps, and I know this is a dangerous word to say, but perhaps it is also true, that we have created too much halakha within the Jewish tradition. And perhaps the reason for that is because we were running away from certain theological and philosophical problems, and therefore creating problems in the halachic world which were easier to than, for example, the question about why did the Holocaust happen, questions about evil in this world, which stay still very, very serious questions within what people call Jewish theology. But I doubt if there is something, but there's definitely something like a Jewish way of thinking. But that is much broader, and there are not too many borderlines there than there are perhaps with other traditions. A framework for, as somebody asked me, for halakha, difficult to know exactly is. I believe that the Shulchan Aruch, which is a great, great work, and even greater is the work of the Rambam, Maimonides, his Mishneh Torah, basically misrepresenting what this tradition is all about. Why? Because the moment they put the law down and finalize it, you're losing one of the great dimensions of the Jewish tradition, and that is of discussion, of debate. Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim. These and those are the words of the living. To me, this is the fundamental foundation on which halakha stands. So I'm arguing today, and not very much pleased with that, that decodify Jewish law, bring it, and perhaps if we have information from earlier days, because there this music is still played in the full sense of the word, and is not yet put into a misgeret, into a particular box, which makes it much harder for the more spiritual soul to live his life in according to these very laws. There's definitely a need for that, because the Shulchan Aruch and Maimonides Mishneh Torah were basically products of the galut, of exile, when Jews were living as a minority among a majority of non-Jews, and themselves their own walls and framework to survive, and we succeeded in doing that. But now that we have our own state, the story, I think, is going to become very different. And we are afraid that halachic authorities of the younger generation are much more open-minded about certain things and try very hard to really respond to what we are in need of today. But once more, in my particular case, it's a form of religiosity. Religiosity is not just a matter of the intellect, it's not even just a matter of the heart. It is the sum total of the human being who has to stand in the presence of God and stop him. And this is a major and difficult undertaking, which I still struggle with a great lot. Are people like Heschel, like Franz Rosenzweig, like William James, famous philosopher on religion in America, Spinoza. But on the other side, I'm deeply influenced by Hasidic thinking. I mention here one most profound thinker within this world, and that was the Meha Shiloach. That was the Ishbitzer, as he was, who writes the most unusual stuff about how he sees the Jewish tradition, how he sees the Torah, how he sees Shamayim, the question about Torah from heaven. And he gives a very different approach. If he would have published this, when he published that, he was a deeply religious Hasidic Jew who lived his life to the law, but he realized that there was much more going on than just the law in itself. Then there is somebody who is still alive today who I have great respect for, and it is Professor Arthur Green, Boston. Or I should mention somebody I never met, and I would have loved to meet him, and that was Eliezer Berkowitz, who has written in great lengths about specifically with the state of Israel, where I think he makes some very important and profound points about how this needs to happen. Before, I was in favor, and I am in favor about lifting the ban on Spinoza, because I think it is absolutely foolish to keep such a ban alive to when the situation of the Jewish people have completely changed, and when they try to put a ban on Noam Chomsky or on Slivkin, who I personally know, I think is a child alternative to do anything like that. I agree with somebody on him. They've tried this, by the way, on me as well, and I made the mistake to fight it, because if I would have had the ban on me, many more people would have read my books, but that is a whole different story. Spinoza did not walk, I go back to the question which I have in front of me over here, he did not just walk out on the Jewish tradition, he was definitely forced out of it. time in century, then the Portuguese Spanish synagogue, influenced still by the Catholic Church, all Marranos. My great-great-grandparents were Marranos. So they were all raised within the Catholic Church, and therefore they took a lot of this Christian way of thinking and this dogmatic way of thinking into the Jewish tradition. And Spinoza was just too big to deal with that. He felt that he was put in jail by having to live by these particular ideologies or these dogmas, and therefore walked out. What he should have done, in my opinion, is to look to other famous rabbis around in Europe and to have a discussion with them, which he never did. He completely left, turned his back on the Jewish tradition and walked out, which I think was a huge mistake on his side. There's a question here which I'm very bothered about and very serious about, and it is the question about our relationship with the non-Jewish world. This has become, in the religious world, highly problematic. Here, especially in Israel, there is within the yeshiva community, I am yeshiva educated, but the problem is that many Bachurei Yeshiva in Israel have no clue what happens in the the non-Jews we know are Arabs, and that is a political issue, which is a very different issue altogether. And I believe that we have to bring many more Jewish values towards the non-Jewish. In need of it, and I tell you something more. I believe that the non-Jewish world is in need of a kind of new religion where we can provide them with some Jewish foundations which would do it good. Christianity and Islam has failed them many times, and I believe that if we would project this Jewish tradition of ours in according to their language and show it where they can make use of it and benefit from it, we would do a very, which I believe is also our purpose in life. We are not here just to be Jews, we are here to serve mankind as the chosen people, as the people who have to inspire the rest of mankind, and we are doing very little of that. And in our educational system, this is nearly not discussed, at least not in Israel. I'm not exactly sure what happens in your case. The problem in here is that within the Jewish tradition, there is a very serious discussion going on. I'm this, who, by the way, nearly never mentions that we are the chosen people, says there's no difference between the Jew and the non-Jew, except that the Jew has to observe the commandments, the 613, while the non-Jewish world has to keep the 7, which is something like the 10 commandments for them, which means that there is no basic difference between the two of us. We have the same soul, but we have a different experience. And when you have a different experience, then obviously you be different, but it is not that it is basically different. It is because history has created us into a very unusual people because of what had happened and because what we experienced from the days of the Torah till this very day. By now we are the most unusual people in the world, and I think the greatest danger of secular Zionism is to try to normalize the Jewish people and make them into a nation like everybody else. That will never work. It has no chance that it will work, and it is a misunderstanding about trying to do that. But that doesn't mean to say that we can look down on the non-Jewish world. We can only say they have a different way of living, which we need to help them in case they are in asking for that sort of thing. My dear friends, I don't know if the half an hour is already over, yes or no, it is, I think. So stop here, and I'm sorry that observations were superficial, but for that you will have to give time and to look at one more word about something which somebody asked me about, the wine incident in the Dr. Rosser when he touched as a non-Jew, halachically, he touched the wine, and at the time I objected against that. Seen the documentary, you will know exactly what I speak about wine by a non-Jew. If I have kosher wine and it is touched by a non-Jew like my brother, who is a very beautiful personality, I will drink wine. But it must be said that in Italy there were some halachic authorities who even permitted that if there was no kosher wine, and they used even to make kiddush kosher wine. That is wine made by non-Jews. I would, first of all, we have so many beautiful and fantastic wines which are kosher, so why should I go for that? But I would not drink the wine which was touched by a self-hating Jew, anti-Semitic person. I would not drink that wine out of protest against that kind of an attitude, which is to me unacceptable. So that gives you a little bit of an idea where I stand on all these matters. I hope time again, Efraim and everybody else.